Hello there, and welcome to Sunriver Books and Music and one of my favorite authors, Dana Haynes, and his new book, Sirocco. So I am going to hope that you're all having a good day today, enjoying the sunshine, and I tell you, you have got nothing but fun ahead of you with this. Whoops, what happened there? Sorry about that. Uh, you have got nothing but fun ahead of you with this book because it goes to some of my favorite places in the world. And if we were going to describe Dana as taking Jack Reacher from Lee Child and Dan Brown's history and settings and putting those together with a female perspective, who may I say has got perhaps a better sense of humor than Jack, we'd about have it. It is a lot of fun to read him. So I'm going to pass it over now to Dana.
Wow, this is great. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And the first thing I was supposed to talk about is the books, but the first thing I need to talk about is Sunriver Books and Music, and Dion. And Oregon is just lucky to have this incredible plethora of independent bookstores, Sunriver being one of the gems in that crown. And I am grateful to be here. I know that all the fans of bookstores are grateful to be here as well. And I just wanted to say thank you once again for this. I'm so thrilled to be here promoting the second of the St. Nicholas Salvaging and Wrecking books. It's Sirocco. It's that guy. Very, very exciting. I'm really having great deal of fun with these books. For those of you who have not read them yet, there's two things to know about the books. I'm a journalist by trade, and I found out during my journalism work that the International Criminal Court has lawyers and judges and clerks and researchers, but it doesn't have cops. There's no cop who works for the International Criminal Court. So when they want to go and find a bad guy, they more or less invite them to come be tried. It's a weird system, but that's how it works. So I thought, well, what if there's somebody whose job it was to go find the worst of the world's worst, tie a nice red bow around them, and deliver them to the court? That's a pretty interesting premise. So that's how I started. Second thing I wanted to do, this was super duper important to me. I had never read a mystery thriller in which there was a male and a female protagonist who were co-equals and not love interests. Finnegan and Fierro, Michael and Katalin, are best buddies. They understand each other. They have vastly different skill sets and backgrounds. Both of them have been isolated from their families because of what they do. And there's no one protagonist and a sidekick. There's Finnegan and Fierro, and I had just never seen that dynamic, and I was very excited to try it. So for the first book, I got to set it partly in Cyprus. I got to travel there, obviously, and that's where their headquarters is. So Cyprus pops up in all the books. And then I got some of that in the former Yugoslavia, and some of that books in France. The new book is in Cyprus and also in Spain. I love Spain to no end. And also I invented a fictional country in North Africa that they had to invade. Our two protagonists walk into a war zone. And while I can do all the research in the world in peaceful places, I am no way I'm going to do research in an actual war zone. So for that I created a fictional city and a fictional country for that. Having so much fun. Got to tell you, I have just finished the manuscript for the third book, The Saint of Thieves. It's off to the publisher now. I haven't heard back from them yet because I just finished it about 2 weeks ago. But fingers crossed. And that's where we are on this series. And I am glad to be here. And we want to talk about the books, want to talk about the travel, and want to hear some questions from the audience. So thank you very much.
Okay, shall we go to pictures then? And so for the audience, you've got question and answer. And as soon as we finish with the pictures, we'll dart over to the question and answer. And please do ask a few questions. It always kind of brings something new out about the book. And I have to say that Katalin is, oh my God, she is what a woman should be. And, in the new book, Sirocco, I'll just say one thing about it, with hopefully not giving much away. I love the way Dana kind of throws in some extra scenes that show her character, and Michael's too. But in the new book, a Russian gentleman's not the right word, but he has the audacity to perhaps try bullying our girl. It doesn't end well for him. I don't think he'll ever do that again. And Michael in the new book really has an opportunity to show off his investigative skills and how he figures things out. So these two, the partnership between these two characters is incredible. And thank you, Dana, for having them not. This book is not a romance started up as a thriller. This is a straight-on thriller. So that's a lot of fun to see a woman and a man having a friendship and going on that way. So I'm going to bring up some pictures, and then Dana will tell us about them. So let's get my screen share button to go. There we go, share screen. And here we go with this. Okay, so share. Start with Amsterdam. Okay, Dana, take it away.
Now, let me say one thing about my wife, Katie King, and I, that we spend 11 and a half months living in an apartment. We don't own land. We don't have property. We don't have kids. We eat really, really inexpensively. This is Katie King. She's awesome. And we live really, really cheap. And then one time a year, we go to Europe. That's how we spend our money. We have one car between us, and then we go to Europe. So I get to go and do these wonderful, wonderful trips. And I got to tell you, this is a mitzvah. I can write these off because this is part of my job, because I write these books. So I get to write off the trips as well. This was Amsterdam. Loved, loved, loved going to Amsterdam for a couple of reasons. One is just it's a wonderful setting because it's both on land and canals. And so it gives you this two-dimensionality that you also get in Venice very much, that there's two different ways of looking at the city. I set a couple of scenes in my last series, which was with St. Martin's Press there. And I've not yet done a major scene here, but I'm madly in love with the town, and it is so darn interesting. And this was one of the things I do when I travel is I will pick a city that seems really, really interesting, and I'll go and I'll absorb it and learn about it, and then later figure out whether or not I have a scene there and which scene to do and which character. So I don't go because I know the plot in advance. I'm a pantser, by the way. I don't plot out very well. I go to absorb what I can, and then later figure out how to use it. So I think we're good with that slide. This is Kyrenia. Kyrenia is a city on the northern island of Cyprus. This is where Finnegan and Fierro's office is. If you look over to the left of the screen, that circle of buildings, kind of a walkway there, and one of the buildings is white. I imagine that's where Michael and Katalin's office is. This is one of the most delightful little weird towns I ever was. The rest of the streets behind it are a weird switchback. You go right into the mountains on the other side of this, and from the mountains you head towards Nicosia, which is the capital. I'm standing on a castle, or excuse me, a fortress that was built first by the Venetians, then later added to by the Ottomans, back when the Venetians and the Ottomans owned this place. After the French had owned this place. If you were to look due north or to the right, you could see a little tiny bit of Turkey. For those of you who, like me, are like all Americans, are geographically challenged, this is the Eastern Mediterranean. Due north is Turkey. Due east is Israel and Syria. Due south is Egypt. And I got to tell you a couple things. First off, it's an incredibly cheap place to travel. It's inexpensive. Secondly, there are 2 British air bases, which means everybody speaks English. That's really nice. And third, a third of the country is run by the Turks, and 2/3 are run by the Greeks. And like Berlin before it, this has a split capital where you have to show your passport to a Greek soldier, then you walk 20 paces and you show your passport to a Turkish soldier, and you get through the checkpoint Charlie, essentially. And you can't have a bad cup of coffee or a bad meal on the damned island, because it's either a Greek side or it's Turkish side. So the food and the coffee is insanely good. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's very small. The way to get from town to town is to get a taxi, because it's a small island. Taxi costs a couple of bucks to get to the next city. So I got to visit this with my friend Tim. We toured the entire country for a couple of weeks. I fell madly in love with Kyrenia. I just thought it was the most gorgeous little town. In the new book that I'm doing, by the way, the one that I just finished, takes place in the town of Gazima Guza, which is what the Turks call it. It's also known as Famagusta, as the Greeks call it. And there's a hidden forbidden city inside that city, and I'm doing an entire massive scene inside this forbidden village that dates back to the Civil War of 1974. I'll explain in the next book. But I just, I mean, as you look at these, you can see why I wanted to set scenes here. I mean, it is just lovely and gorgeous and absolutely unbelievable. I think I'm good with that one. This is Lake Luzon.
Lake Como.
This is Lake Como. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Katie and I fell madly in love with Como, and I've set scenes here in one of my crash books from the NTSB St. Martin's stories. I've set scenes here in 2 of the Finnegan and Fierro books. I'm nuts. I'm bonkers about this little island. It's shaped sort of like a stick figure running man. It's in northern Italy, due north of Milan. And you can get there by train or you can get there by ferry. And these are magical little villages that are hunkered against this lake, which is surrounded by mountains. Some of the mountains are in France and some of them are in Italy. You're right you're very close to the border. And it's unbelievably gorgeous and romantic. And Katie and I have stayed in Varenna several times. Just love that little town. We've stayed there often enough that the woman who runs the primary hotel and restaurant, when we arrive, she will say, "It's good to see you. I've booked you a table in the restaurant for 8 o'clock, and this is what you've ordered." We're like, okie doke, because she's never led us wrong yet. So this is one of those places where I've been often enough that I feel like I can write about it with really a lot of verisimilitude and really grab some of that culture in that town. Just adore that. I think we're good there. This is, again, I'm going to say this again, this is a mitzvah. This is a blessing that I've got to do all this travel, because you could try and do the research on the internet. I've tried to do the research on the internet. You're never going to get like the size of that coffee cup and that little, this is Spain, this is Madrid, and I'm in one of the great squares there, Plaza del Sol, Piazza del Sol, Porto del Sol. And Madrid's gorgeous. Madrid's awesome. And the coffee there is beyond good. I'm a caffeineaholic. I drink 2 pots of coffee a day, every day, but it was incredible there. Katalin Fierro de Har, her father is Spanish, her mother is Algerian. She grew up rich and privileged in Spain. Her father is an industrialist and a major figure in the left liberal political world. Her mother is an academic and a journalist and sort of the face of the new Muslim woman in Europe. And when the terrorists bombed the trains in 2004, 2010, I forget when, in Spain, Katalin, she'd raced yachts, she'd had horses growing up, and she'd been quite rich. She quit the family, joined the army, became a soldier. And then after being a soldier, she became a spy. And after being a spy, she became an assassin for king and country. But it was while touring in Spain and she's getting a sense of some of the political culture there and the strong left and the strong right of the politics of Spain, and how revered people like poets are in that society, much the way that athletes are in other places, that I thought, oh, I can't wait to have a character who was inculcated and steeped in that culture, and to make it a woman too was awfully fun. There's only a few scenes I've done in Madrid, actually. I did Barcelona for a great deal of the second book, including a chase scene on La Ramblas, the great walkway there, which was tremendous fun. And I have to say, what Katie and I will do is, I know for sure I'm going to set a scene there, is that she takes photos, I take notes, and then we choreograph it. We will walk it as, here's how the good guys would have come in, here's how the bad guys come here, here's where they meet. And it's a blessing. It's just amazing. I'm very, very in love with Spain. Spain's awesome. I think we're good at that one. Oh my gosh. Is this Paris?
Madrid.
This is Madrid. Forgive me. This is not one of my photos. Madrid again, it's just the history of it. And I gotta say, I was saying this to Dion a little while ago. When I talk about the history of these places, you got to understand that I'm from Idaho. I'm from towns that date back tens of years, right? The oldest building in my hometown was an A&W root beer. And so for a dude like me to be in a place that has 1,000-year history, to see stuff that, you know, predates Napoleon and predates Charlemagne and you know, damn near predates Jesus. That stuff's amazing to me. And Spain, obviously, that whole Iberian Peninsula had a very Muslim, Ottoman influence for a great deal of time. It was a place where once upon a time the Jews were accepted and admitted and part of the culture right up until the 1490s, when they were driven from that area as well, as it had been everywhere else it had ever been. It's so much fun for a dude like me. I should say too that my dad's a U.S. history teacher. My little brother's a U.S. history teacher. Tyler just turned 50. I've got to stop calling him my little brother, don't I? My younger brother is a U.S. history teacher. So I kind of grew up appreciating history and having a vague understanding of history. And I'm a political science major, and I study politics. And as a journalist, I've covered politics. So I understand a lot of the politics of the places I've been. It is such an honor to be there. And I do learn so much there that I would never, ever learn from just doing research on the internet, how things smell, how they taste, how the wind feels, that chalky, brittle, sandy weather you get in Spain when the Sirocco is blowing out of Africa and you're getting the Sahara sand in your teeth. It's awesome.
Next up.
Yeah, please.
There's Paris.
One of the gargoyles, probably a Cathedral of Notre Dame. Now, I got to say, in 2019, the roof of the Notre Dame caught on fire, and I cried. I was in the newsroom at the Portland Tribune when this happened, and I had tears. I just had to, because Katie and I, one of our very, very first vacations when we were first together before we got married, and one of my first pictures of her, it's on my refrigerator, it's Katie in front of Notre Dame. So when that roof burned and the spires burned, I felt like that just broke my heart. I've set several scenes in Paris. There are scenes in the first book in Paris. There are scenes in this book, Sirocco, in some of the seedier neighborhoods of Paris, and that's sort of fun. We took a subway to an area that you're not supposed to go to and walk through it, and we went, yep, this is pretty seedy. I'm glad I'm here at noon. I have a feeling that once the sun sets, this would be a crappy neighborhood. So that was sort of fun to see. And then I have to say too, if you can imagine, this is the top of Cathedral de Notre Dame, which is on the Illicite, right in the middle of the river. If you were to drop down to ground level and walk to your left, towards the left of the screen, you would find the Shakespeare and Company bookstore. This coffee cup came from there, one of the great English language bookstores in the world. And you walk one block behind it, and there's an apartment that Katie and I have rented several times that when you open the window in the living room, that's what you see is Notre Dame. And we've stayed right there in what the Parisians or French would refer to as kilomètre zéro, because everything is measured from its distance from Notre Dame in all of France. And it's been really grand writing about that place. One of the things, by the way, this has nothing to do with the books, but it's smack in the heart of Paris, very crowded city. At night, you can walk down some of these neighborhoods and there's hardly anybody there. You can get to a block where there's nobody but you. And you'll find a restaurant with 3 tables outside, and one of the tables is taken, you take 2 of the others. And if you know what you're doing, if you've been there often enough, you can find ways to get away from the madding crowd. Forgive that colloquialism. And it's Paris can be small and intimate and quiet if you're patient enough to find it. So I've loved setting scenes here. And I'll tell you now, I'm writing a different book that is not connected to the Finnegan and Fierro series. I'm working on that manuscript today, and I had a scene today that I was writing that was in Paris, and was once again falling madly in love with it. It's the most romantic city in the world, and I obviously get to travel with my incredibly beautiful wife, and my love for Paris is hard to express. I'm good with that one. This is me writing, because I have to tell you honestly, do I have one here? I think I do. Maybe not. I write with I do. Reach around behind me. I write on steno pads with pencils for the first drafts of all my books. And the reason I do that is because I'm a journalist, and I learned to write while sitting in city council meetings and school board meetings in the middle of the night, writing up the notes so I could dash back to my office and write a quick story. So because of that, I'm really, really comfortable with the steno pad and the mechanical pencil. So all of the first drafts I write are that way. This is a coffee shop in Paris. This is up in the second arrondissement. The city is a circle, in each neighborhood around this circle has its own number. This is the second arrondissement, so it's north of the river. And I was working on one of the Finnegan and Farrow books while Katie was doing something else that day. This is me. I'd gotten myself a cappuccino, and it came with a couple of little chocolates, and I was sitting there writing away. And I just remember thinking, for a dude from Twin Falls, Idaho, this is insanely lucky. I mean, I am the luckiest son of a gun in the entire planet that this gets to be part of my life. So can't remember what scene I was writing there, but I can tell you I was having more fun than anybody else in the world. I'm done. Oh, Lake Lemans. This is a scene from an apartment in a beautiful old Belle Epoque hotel in Luzon. Switzerland is, first off, I'm going to say, it's a stupidly expensive country, ridiculously expensive. Partly that is it's in neither the EU, the European Union, nor the Eurozone. They don't use the euro coin there. And for a number of reasons, it's just a bloody expensive town. This is looking out at that incredible lake that separates parts of Switzerland from France. Looking across the lake, you're looking at Evian, which is where the Evian water comes from. And then Geneva or Genève is like, if you were 1/3 of the way to the right of this photo, around the lake, you'd be at Geneva. I've set a number of scenes here. There was a murder that I set in this country because I write murder mysteries. You know, this is how I celebrate these lovely, beautiful countries. As I go there and I kill people in my books. I'm a terrible, terrible tourist. One thing, Katie and I went with her father when we were traveling with him, and this is the view from his hotel room, and it's insanely, stupidly expensive town. So we went to a little grocery store and we bought a bottle of wine and a bottle opener, and we bought snacks, and we went back and sat on his balcony for, I want to say, 5 hours and watched the sunset and had the cheapest meal anyone has ever eaten in Luzon. And it was just wonderful. Then straight across the river is Evian, and there's a scene in the second book in Evian where one of the characters I'm going to call her an antagonistic character, where she begins to change and her life goes the wrong direction. So I've managed to cull quite a few stories out of this beautiful, beautiful part of the world, and I'll probably never, ever go back. I'm good with that one. This could be any city in the world because I have one mutant power and one mutant power only, as that is kitties will always come and find me because I am a cat person and cats know this. This is a kitty from Venice. She had stepped out to see what I was doing and asked me if I needed directions, tell me where to go to get anywhere. I've always been a cat. I cohabitate with cats. One doesn't own a cat. One lives in the same place as a cat. And everywhere, Katie's got 2 dozen photos of me with cats in foreign countries because they will come and find me and give me directions and tell me what to do. And this little girl, she was just really, really, really sweet. Again, and I said this earlier, but it's worth repeating. You can do all the research on the internet that you want, or you can go to the library and do a ton of research if you want. But just this sense of what the stone walls feel like there, right behind me, and the wooden doors that are recessed in, and all of the cats that are everywhere in Venice, I had seen maps of Venice my entire life. I did the research before I took off, and the thing I hadn't figured out about Venice till I got there is this. Imagine if you were in London and you had a map of the streets of London, right? And then you had another map of the subway system in London. And those two things don't look anything alike. If you're in Paris, if you're in New York City, if you're in Washington, D.C., the streets don't look anything like the subways. And in Venice, the street and the subway, which is called the canals, are on top of each other in 2 dimensions. So you get to see both of the maps at the same time. That's partly why the island is so confusing to people, is because if you walk that direction on one of the calles and you head that direction on one of the canals on a boat, you're not going to get to the same place. They veer, and there's no urban planning. It looks like the urban planner was Dr. Seuss. Nothing comes to a right angle in that town. And I have the character in one of my books, and in the third one, say that in the 500 years ago there was a bordello there that needed to get beer from that place over there. So the two people who owned the bordello and the brewery got together and they built that little bridge. And 500 years later, your Google Maps will find that bridge if you need to find it. And that's how things were built on this ridiculous, tiny, sinking island. You know, Mark Twain once told his friends, get to Venice as soon as you can because it won't be here very long. It's been endangered forever. And it's wild and it's bizarre. And if you talk to Venetians, if you ask for directions from a Venetian, they will say, Dritto, sempre dritto, dritto. Go, just stay straight, stay straight. And the reason they always answer stay straight is because it's a damn island. You'll find signs everywhere to either the Rialto Bridge or to Piazza San Marco, St. Mark's Square. And as long as you know where those two things are and where you are, and also to the train station, if you go to the left, go to the right, or go straight, you're going to run into one of those three things. So it doesn't matter which direction you turn. Everywhere you turn is going to get you one of those three. So if you ask a Venetian where to go, you'll hear dritto, sempre dritto. Just keep going. You'll get there. You'll find your way. And that's the kind of stuff I could never hope to get by doing the research from here. You can only get it when you're there. And my God, Dion and I were talking earlier. I'm just madly in love with that town. I have to say before we go on too that Katie, who is a foot and a half smarter than I am, I told her I wanted to go to a vacation in 2018 in which I got to cook because I really enjoy cooking. And she said, I found an apartment in Venice, so you can cook while we're there. I said, no, apartment, that's great. So we decided to get something way off the beaten path. It's way over, a long ways away from everything. And our little square there, the only people eating that square were locals. It was grandmothers yelling at little kids to stop horsing around with their hula hoops. I mean, there were no tourists at all. And we walked up, and I was trying to find the address, and we walked up to it, and she said, oh yeah, I think this is the apartment building. And I said, sweetie, this is a palazzo. It was this beautiful canal-side palace that dated back to the 1700s. And lo and behold, they had broken it into apartments, and Katie had found me this place. Inside has 20-foot ceilings with open beams on the ceilings, and there's a very modern, up-to-date kitchen, tiny but very up-to-date, and then a balcony that looks out over a canal. Are you kidding me? So the entire vacation was spent with, we'd go out in the morning. I took with me a paring knife, an apron, and a shopping bag. And we'd go out and we'd get all the food we wanted. We'd come back and I would cook and drink wine while I was cooking. And then we'd sit on our balcony for 4-hour, 5-hour meals until the moon came up and the sun set. And it was the most ridiculously romantic place in the world. The last time we went with 2019, just before the pandemic, we went with the agenda of going to the same place, doing the same thing, but doing nothing else but that. And we would wake up in the morning, and as we would leave the Palazzo, Casa de Pattori, we would say, today let's turn left, because we hadn't done that yet. And that was the agenda for the day. So we would take off, and we would find some new places we hadn't been before, and we'd wander around, and we'd have a great coffee, and then we'd have a spectacular lunch, and we'd find a grocer, and I would get the food that I needed to make for that night, and we'd wander some more and get back, and then I'd get cooking. And the next morning we'd wake up and say, let's turn right, because we haven't done that yet. I mean, that was the agenda for that vacation. And so the third book, which is called The Saint of Thieves, a huge chunk of that takes place in two different segments in Venice. One early in the book when we're learning about Venice, and later in the book when they're having one of their famed floods, the Acqua Alta. And our protagonists, Finnegan and Fierro, have to chase a guy they've been trying to get through the flooded Venice. So that was a scene that was incredibly exciting to write. I had a grand fun doing it. I'm sorry, I blathered on this one. Katie's do that to me. I'm done with that photo. I had said that I had said that Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, was a split town, and it is. The United Nations still has a presence there. The blue and white barrels are the United Nations symbols. That sign, this is on the Greek side, so the writing's in Greek, and it's saying the checkpoint to get to the Turkish side is off there to your right. And we're maybe a block from checkpoint Charlie. And the civil war that split the island, 1/3 Turkish, 2/3 Greek, happened in 1974. So this has been like it's been for a long time now. And the most amazing thing is if you look at the buildings behind the blue and white UN barrels, they look like they're in terrible, terrible shape because the Turks have a very long memory and they like to be angry. And so if you're walking through Nicosia and you're on the Greek side, and it's a souk sort of, it's a lovely winding uh, uh, market, and then you go through the checkpoint, you go through the Greek side, and you walk your 20 paces, you go through the Turkish side, and you'd think you're going to walk into a Turkish souk, but the first thing you walk into is 1 block long, the length of the red zone, of demolished buildings. So the buildings directly behind the UN checkpoint, Turks have never fixed up. There are machine gun braille on the walls, and there are mortar holes in walls, and roofs are missing, and rats are running around. And you go 1 block beyond that, and you're in the Turkish market, or the souk, and it's lovely and terrific and wonderful, and the food is divine, and the coffee is insanely good. But the Turks have kept that 1 block long stretch devastated, because they're mad at the Greeks still to this day about it, and they just don't want that to go away. So those buildings you can see there in the background, that are part of the rear sides of buildings that were demolished in 1974, and the Turks refused to tear them down and refused to fix them up. And it's the strangest thing about Nicosia. I love the town. I just thought it was beautiful beyond words. And like I said earlier, it's very, very cheap town if you ever want vacation. Secondly, everybody speaks English because of the 2 British air bases there. And third, there's a weird thing with the winds around Cyprus, that it's always 20 to 40 degrees cooler than Turkey and Egypt and Israel and Syria. So when it's 90 degrees there, it'll be 70 here. So if you are looking for a cheap place to visit that has great food and everybody speaks English, Cyprus. Bam. I'm done with that one. This is a castle in Italy on Lake Garda, and I use it in the 3rd book. And this castle is sinking, and it's been sinking for a long time. Once upon a time, the Venetians needed to guard against the Prussians, right? So they built fortresses on the Lake Garda side to keep the Prussians at bay, and they had a fleet. The Venetian fleet there was as impressive as the fleet they had in the Adriatic, in some ways, relative size. And this castle has begun to sink. And so when you're walking around it, you'll look at one squared off little portion of it, and there's green grass, and you can see where they once kept horses, and you can see where the well is to this day, etc. And you look at the next one, and it's underwater because it's sunk enough on that side that the lake has invaded it. And I remember walking around that castle, and I got to tell you honestly, the name of the castle is escaping me this second. It's driving me bonkers. And I was thinking, how in the hell has nobody ever filmed a James Bond movie here? Because if you can swim into a castle, why would that not be a James Bond scene? I mean, they put that damn dude in a scuba suit in every second episode, right? So I thought, fine, they're not going to do it, I'll do it. So I had a scene where Finnegan and Fierro are being chased across Lake Garda, and they get to this place, and they abandon the boat, and they swim into the castle while there's a big concert going on there. As soon as Katie and I saw this place and we were walking around, we thought, oh, for God's sakes, I've got to put a scene here. It would be criminally negligent for a thriller writer not to write a scene at this partially submerged castle. So I did, and it ended up being a great deal of fun. And by the way, Katie shot that photo. I am not actually a photogenic person, but Katie is quite miraculous. So I actually look quasi-decent there. I'm done with that one. Sorry about the quality of this one. This is one I should have said a better one. This is again me in Paris. But the one thing I love about this is it was on my very first tour there with Katie King. We had both been there before we were a couple, but this is our first time going together, and it's ridiculously romantic town if you're there with the love of your life. And when I get to travel, part of how I define my marriage to Katie is the wonderful, wonderful trips we've taken. And this one will always be near and dear to my heart because this was the first time we got to travel as sweethearts. And sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but maybe it's because it pulls the strings of my heart. So I had to send that one along. I'm good with that one.
Okay, so that's the end of the pictures. And maybe Dana, you'd like to give just a hint to everyone on the plot. We know that Katalin and Michael are going to be approached to find and bring to justice some bad guys that the CNI, the CIA, and this paramilitary group have come up empty, and away they go.
One of the things I wanted to play with in this one was that sometimes a couple of people who are subtle can do things that big governments can't do. And so, and by the way, not for nothing, but I'm being Zoom bombed by Dion's cat, who is over her right shoulder. So when I told you cats will always find me, and now we have proof positive of my, she definitely found me. So anyway, the idea in this one was that there's a bomber who has, for political reasons, has been blowing things up in Europe. And one of the persons that blew up was a former CIA agent who is now a high-ranking official at a paramilitary organization, one of these like Blackwater. They're a independent business whose business is war. And the more I'd read about these paramilitary organizations, the more I thought, I really want to write about them because I think they're really, really, really scary. They're a war. They are a Department of Defense without a government. They are an army without a civilian leadership. And I think that's insanely risky. I think that's something we probably ought not to have in this world. So I definitely wanted to have it. So I invented this group. They're called Sooner, Slye, and Rydell. Because that was the most innocuous name I could think of. I didn't want a groovy, sexy, I didn't want to call him something like Spectre, I wanted to, it's the name of a law firm, essentially. And so I thought that was fun. But they're involved, and they're keeping the CIA out from finding the bombers, and they're keeping the Spanish intelligence, the CNI, from finding the bombers because they keep interfering. And so you got this government, and this big, massive, multi-million-dollar multinational paramilitary organization all bumping into each other. And sending an interferer or two people, right, who just happen to have a small airplane, and they can get places that other people can't. And Michael is an exceptionally good investigator. He's a really good cop. And Katalin has been a spy and a soldier and an assassin, and she can get information from people because she doesn't mind bruising her knuckles and drawing some blood. So between the two of them, they can go and get stuff done and find things in a way that these lumbering behemoths can't. That was an elegant, forgive me for calling it elegant. It was an idea that I thought was going to be elegant that I really wanted to play with and have a lot of fun with. Not for nothing, by the way, but CNI is the Spanish intelligence apparatus, and CNI was also the name of my newspaper chain when my last job before this one, we Community Newspapers Inc. So every time I wrote, the guys from CNI were firing their guns, I would stop and giggle because what I had in my mind was the West Lynn Tidings and the Lake Oswego Review was running around firing guns because that's what CNI means in my world. So that was a little in-joke about using that. The other thing I really wanted to play with in this one, I should say really quickly, Michael's dad was a cop, his grandfather, his uncles, and his younger sister are New York City cops. And Michael found out that his dad was corrupt, probably his uncles too. And so he quit, dropped out of being a New York cop and fled. Katalin Fierro Dahar grew up Spanish and Algerian, very rich, in a very liberal family, gave all that up to go be a soldier and then a spy and then an assassin. None of her family knows what she does. None of Michael's family is knowing what he's doing now because, again, he was kind of, that big old stick up his butt had a big old stick up its butt about his father being corrupt, right? And now he's got a job in which he essentially kidnaps people and takes them across international borders. So being distanced from their family is a really important element starting this book, this series. So in this book, the thing that's going on, the bombing, gets a little bit too close to Katalin's family. Her family actually gets drawn up into this thing. And at some point, she's got to decide, we can keep small and dexterous and deft and fleet of foot and stay below the radar. But at some point, I might have to let my parents know what the hell I'm doing because they're in it now. And so that was part of the elements of this book. In the third book, the one I just finished, it's Michael and his family's turn to decide, do I need to bring the family in to know what I'm doing? I'll get into that one later. But that's the one of the big premises of this one, Sirocco.
Very good. So I don't have any questions yet from the audience. So audience, come up with some questions. And meanwhile, I'll just comment on Katalin's mother. I found that portrayal wonderful because we have this very strong, elegant Muslim woman, and her daughter is this tough, assassin, and it's such a contrast. And I love the way that that she was portrayed as someone intelligent and very honorable. I like that. So you want to talk
She
a
was.
bit about?
Uh, that was something I really wanted to do. Was I wanted to minimize the number of dumb people in the books. I try not to have any secondary characters or villains who are actually dumb. I want smart good guys and smart bad guys and smart members of the family, because I frankly think it's a cheat in a novel when the bad guys, for instance, do something because they're not very bright. That always just annoys me. So I wanted everybody to be really smart. Secondly, the idea about Katalin growing up in a liberal, very rich establishment was sort of fun, because I'm exceptionally liberal myself. I'm slightly to the left of Leon Trotsky. So having abandoned that part of the world and that to go be a soldier, and then to fight in trenches, and then to fight as a spy and then as an assassin, seemed to me like a lot of fun. I was really going to enjoy that. So I wanted her father and her mother not to be dumb. I didn't want them to be antagonistic characters. They're simply characters whom she has had to turn her back on because of what she does. And trying to find out, is it going to be possible to repair that relationship? She's obviously would like to be close to her mom and dad again if she could, but what she has done would be anathema to their background. So that was one of those things I was really, really having a lot of fun with in that book. And then again, I'm doing the same thing with Michael and his family in the third one.
Michael and Katalin, when they meet, I love that scene because he is so uptight about, oh, we've got to get the bad guy and take the bad guy in, and the bad guy will go to court and have his day and his trial. And Katalin's like, no, we don't.
That was, from the very beginning, I wanted to do this notion that one guy believes that you do everything by the book, right? And the other one believes there is no book. There's only two categories, win and lose. And anything you do to stay out of that second category is fine. And if they're going to be partners, he's going to have to become more like her, and she's going to have to become more like him. And that dynamic of how they learn from each other was something from the very beginning, I really wanted to play with. That they are, because they're friends, and because they have these different backgrounds and skill sets that are complementary and supplementary to each other, that they would grow closer together as good partners and as good business partners, but never as lovers. Actually, in the third book, introduce Katalin having a lover, and Michael's like, good, you're really uptight. You really should be getting some. So he's like, I'm all for that. That's great news. So that was something I really, really wanted to play with. While we're waiting for a question, I have to tell you, I've been doing some research into clues, because I'm nuts about trying to find clues in the real world, find them and how they hide in the real world and how we hide them in a book are the same thing. And I've been playing with, this is going to sound really stupid, I'll do this until we get a question.
We have one.
I've been playing with Morse code, because I think Morse code is fascinating. It doesn't exist in our world anymore. You don't think, but it actually is out there. And let me tell you two real quick ones. And this is the way my brain works, so I want to share this really fast. One way that Morse code exists in our world today is that the letter M is dash, dash, and the letter I is dot, dot, dash, dash, dot, dot. And the only reason that's interesting is because Lalo Schifrin made those the first opening notes, the theme from Mission Impossible, M-I. Dun, 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 dun. He starts with M-I in the music for Mission Impossible, which I think is great. I've heard that my entire life. You've heard it your entire life. I don't care who's listening to this. You've heard it your entire life. And hidden in there is the Morse code for M-I, Mission Impossible, which I just love. And the other one that I absolutely love is that the Morse code for good luck is, I have it on my phone, but it's actually hard to hear. It goes dum, 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 dum. And that's good luck in Morse code. It goes on for quite a bit after that. And the reason we know this is because I don't care where you went to high school or where you went to college. At some point, cheerleaders at your school went, that cheer, which is in every high school and college in America, is Morse code for good luck. At my high school, it was go, go, really go, Tigers go. That's Morse code for good luck. So finding that kind of stuff in the real world and then finding ways that I can twist it and bend it and put it in my books, that's the most fun of being a mystery writer, I can tell you. Okay, I'm done with that one. I'm sorry, that was just my rant for today on weirdness in the world.
No, that was fun. And Janet Gordon, you had a hand up, but I don't know quite what you were going to say. So if you can type it in the question and answer, then we can question and answer. So because all I saw was a little hand up thing. This is from Sally. What was your favorite place to visit to do your research?
And I'm sorry to say this to you, but it might be Venice or Paris. And I've already talked about them at length, but they're so amazing. They're so rich in history, and they're so wonderful, and they're so romantic and incredible. But it was really fun going to the former Yugoslavia. That was very, very strange. My buddy Tim and I were traveling, and we went to a town called Mostar, and Mostar is in Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina. There's the Neretva River goes right through the middle of it, and it's a three-dimensional town, like, because there's cliffs down to the Neretva. And so this restaurant will be on that level, and below it'll be a hotel, and below that'll be a little shop, and up on this side there'll be a park, and on that side there'll be places you can shop, and it's a three-dimensional town. And when we were there, we saw machine gun bullets on the walls, and we saw some mortar holes, and we got talking to a proprietor and said, "This is from the Civil War. This is from the Yugoslavian, when after Tito died and Yugoslavia broke up." And he said, "Yeah, yeah." And I said, "So this is obviously, Mostar is a Muslim town. So was this the Serbians shooting at you?" And he said, "No, no, this is the people from the east side of Mostar shooting at the people of the west side of Mostar. As soon as Tito, who ran for 40 years, as soon as he died, all of the old ancient anger at each other popped right back to the surface, and all these civil wars broke out again. And he somehow kept all of that at bay for the 4 years he was the strong man. And the minute his body was room temperature, bam, those fights were back again." And so that was just, Tim and I were stunned by that, how interesting that was. So that town was interesting. Sarajevo was interesting. Obviously, the great 4-year-long siege, Sarajevo. I've written several scenes there. So those were amongst the most, going to Belgrade, the capital of Serbia, was really, really interesting too. Not a place you want to go as a tourist. It looks like San Diego, kind of. But that's some of the most interesting places I've gotten to travel to do the research.
Very good. So still waiting for Janet's questions. Now, hoping we're getting one from Janet because she has good questions. Anyone else want to type a question in, go for it. And while we are waiting for that, may I just add that it's a really bad idea for anyone to do something that is going to make Katalin feel protective about her family. It is not a good move.
You listeners can and viewers can see that I have some gray hair, and I'm a man of a certain age. And I got to tell you, as a little kid, I fell madly in love with Mrs. Peel from the Avengers. My very first crush in the world was Diana Rigg as Mrs. Peel in the Avengers. And I have had a soft spot in my heart for a woman who can kick ass, and who, by the way, also can wear black leather, ever since Diana Rigg. I was nuts about her growing up. I'm nuts about her today. She was on Game of Thrones. I thought she was incredibly, insanely good on that. What a career. Also, fewer people will know this reference. There's a British comic strip called Modesty Blaise that started in 1962. Peter O'Donnell wrote it from 62 until 2000. 6 days a week, never missed one. Nobody else wrote a word of it. And it was about a woman who was really, really, really strong, and who had a very macho male guy who answered to her. It was her second. He would do whatever she said, Willie Garvin. And those two influences, the Avengers and Modesty Blaise, really influenced me a great deal. And when I write Katalin, you can see that I'm drawing on that really tough as nails, very competent woman archetype that I got a crush on when I was 10. So.
I'm glad you got that crush, because I really like Katalin. I think, yes, that's how we should all be. She is one tough girl, and good at what she does. Very.
Yep.
So Janet's got a question and a comment. So the comment, and thank you, Janet. You always have good ones. She says, "I have already read the book and loved it. A small point. I appreciated that a couple of the scenes had a character summarize the situation so far, since it was complicated," which it was. You never quite know what's going to happen. I enjoyed it too. And then the question is, who would win in a fight between Katalin and Daria. Oh, Daria was another really cool bride.
So Daria Gibran was the Israeli protagonist of the 4 books I did at St. Martin's Press. Again, you can see where I have a soft spot in my heart for the woman who kicks ass. That's always been that's one of my archetypal characters. And the difference between the two of them is that Daria was fully grown and fully bloomed. She was who she was, whereas in Katalin is changing over time. That's primarily how I see the two. The other things about them is that Daria was I don't want to say that she wasn't bright, because she was very, very smart about certain things, but if there was trouble to her left, she would always head to the left, and then she'd see what happens. She always had a 2-part plan. Her plan was, first I'm going to show up, and then I'm going to see what happened. And that was her planning. And in many ways, Katalin has been a soldier, and she's worked within that realm, and she's been a spy, and she's worked with others, and she's much more analytical, and she's much more likely to have a plan before she shows up. There's a Belarusian fellow who runs afoul of her in this second book, and you can see that he thinks that she's lured her into a place, and boy, in fact, she's the one doing the luring. Not to give too much away, because she's calculating. So if there's a street fight, there's a good chance that Daria would win. But if they knew a fight was coming up in a couple of days, I think Katalin Fierro Dahar would.
Daria, the one scene in the book you had, this is what Daria does for fun. She runs around these broken airplanes and lets guys jump out at her and try to beat her up. And it doesn't ever go well for the guys, but that's what she does for fun. Yeah, she's pretty tough broad too. So let's see, we don't have any other question. Anyone else have another question? Go ahead and type it in. Otherwise, we'll say goodbye here in just a minute. If you enjoy thrillers, I just have so much fun reading these. I mean, you can sink down with them, and you can watch Katalin take on the bad guys in ways that we don't often get to. So that's kind of fun.
I have some news about them, by the way. Finnegan and Fierro are going to appear in a short story in Alfred Hitchcock magazine in the July-August edition. It comes out June 30th, 15th, June 15th. So I got to write a short story about them, and sure enough, a magazine picked it up. I'm very excited about that. And there are only 2 magazines in America anymore that have wide circulation that publish mysteries. One is Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, and the other is Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. And Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine also purchased one of my stories, and the characters who are in that story are Sally Blue and the Black Hearts, who are the thieves who help Finnegan and Fierro all the time. So there are 2 short stories that are in that Finnegan and Fierro universe that will be appearing quite soon. I don't know about Ellery Queen. I don't have a date for that one yet, but Alfred Hitchcock will be out in the July-August edition. And so I've gotten to go back to these characters I love and try them in a different venue, try and do them in a short story, which I'm not a short story writer. So there will be some more adventures of Michael and Katalin before the 3rd book comes out, and I'm pretty excited about that.
You know where your story should be? Hollywood should be listening to this, because my God, the scenes that you go through, and I mean, look at how well the Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code and all of that. We've got a lot more action going on here. I mean, you have got one hot babe that is just taking it to the bad guys, and some pretty complex plots, and a good investigator. What is wrong with those men in Hollywood? They should be calling you up.
And the Bourne films all do really well in European settings as well. I've gotten 0 traction. I've written screenplays based on my novels, and I've gotten them registered, but I've gotten no traction at all from Hollywood. So Dion, your lips to God's ear. That would be awesome if that were to come about. It would be gravy. If it never comes about, I'm fine. But if it did, that would be so cool.
Probably be more effective my lips to Steven Spielberg's ear or something like that. But
I would take that too.
Yeah, take that one to the bank. Okay, so we don't have any more questions. So do you want to say anything before we end, Dana?
Yeah, a couple of things. If you could purchase the book through an independent bookstore, thank you, because I'm very proud of this book and I'm very proud of Oregon's independent bookstores. And so if you're thinking about purchasing a book, you know, Amazon's going to do fine. They'll pay the rent this week. Go to an indie bookstore and see if you can't support them. I go to the mystery conventions, not during the pandemic, but before that. And one of the things that people always say is, how many bookstores, indies, do you have in your town? And most writers will say, oh, we have one in our state, or we used to have one in our state. And all the writers from Oregon will say, oh yeah, we've got 8 or 9. And some of them are phenomenal. And obviously this is one of them. So please, if you could, purchase the book. By the way, if you can do a review of the book online, you'd be amazed how much that helps the sales too. And you can do, there's Goodreads, there's Amazon reviews, and there's other places. If you like the book and you wanted to do a review, you'd be doing me a mitzvah. Thank you very much. That would be awesome. That would be the only things. And I just want to say one last time, I'm honored to be here. This was grand fun. I can't wait for the pandemic to be over so I can do this on location there, because it's one of the best bookstores in the world. And I'm grateful, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. And thank you, audience, for being with us today. I hope you had a good time with us. And we will now say good evening. I hope we all get to see you in Sunriver soon, and we'll keep fingers crossed. Thanks, Dana. I'm looking forward to that book in Venice. Take care.
Yay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.